stations. So they're really telling folks right now is the time to hunker down. If you're out and about, get back to your homes and stay put there, because officers, once these winds start picking up, they will not be able to get to you if you were to need help. So they're really encouraging folks to do the right thing, stay put, because again, as these winds start to pick up, we're starting to see some rain coming in now. I'm not sure if you hear that wind. Once that happens, it will not be safe for them to be out there to help you. Guys?
All right, thank you very much.
And there's already 3,000 people, according to the CLECO outage map, without power in Slidell, and it doesn't even really look, I mean, they've got a long way to go for this afternoon.
And you were saying more than 100,000 here in Orleans?
Yeah, I'm checking out the Entergy outage maps. Statewide, we've got about 150,000 people on the Entergy map without power, but 152,000 of them are in the metro area here in New Orleans and in out to Kenner.
And the worst of the weather is not even there yet. And I think this is presenting a big problem for the Sewerage and Water Board. At least that's the concern, that this is going to be a big problem for the Sewerage and Water Board. And Mike Perlstein is on that part of the story for us. Of course, we need that power in order to power the pumps, Mike.
That's right, Katie, and we are here at the Sewerage and Water Board main plant. I can tell you that just in the 10 minutes since we have set up, we heard those loud EMDs, electromotive diesel generators, kick in. Sounds like a jet engine. You might be able to hear it in the background. But an even more urgent concern is that with the Entergy power, a major breaker tripped here at the main plant, affecting sewage. So the Sewerage and Water Board put out a notice urging people to not run appliances such as dishwashers, washing machines, and even limit toilet use as much as possible, because many of the pumps for sewage are out. That could compound problems in addition to everything else that we're seeing in these deteriorating conditions. Obviously wind, flooding, but we could have an additional problem in some households of backed up sewage because of that breaker being out. Many sewage pumps are down. So that is the update from the Sewerage and Water Board. As you can see in these deteriorating conditions that we keep hearing about all over the region, including here in New Orleans, and now an urgent call from the Sewerage and Water Board to limit the use of those appliances. Back to you.
I mean, you know, what they're talking about there is, of course, if you were planning to run your dishwasher and do a couple loads of laundry in preparation for losing power, it is not the time to do that. The city really does need people to conserve water at this point. So try to use as little as you can. Mike, how precarious of a situation is this, given that we haven't even seen the worst of the rain and the need for the power that they obviously are having a problem with?
Right, and I think we can, the message from the Sewerage and Water Board was very brief, but it was urgent to please anyone and everyone in Orleans limit the use of dishwashers, washing machines, and even toilets. Otherwise, you run the risk of sewage backing up. We don't know the actual number of the sewage pumps. Now, they're separate from the drainage pumps. Drainage pumps run half on the Entergy electric grid and half on the Sewerage and Water Board's owned self-generated power from turbines. We heard earlier from the Sewerage and Water Board and Ghassan Korban, the director, that 3 of the turbines are operational, which should give sufficient power. But like I said, and you can hear it in the background, those very loud, jet engine loud portable generators known as the EMDs have kicked in just since we've been standing out here. So obviously, the whole cycle of drainage has started here in Orleans. It's always a precarious situation. We've seen when there's mass power outages that oftentimes the actual drainage pumps go down for lack of power. We hope that does not happen. But the situation that we now have is that those sewage pumps are down, and some people may see that, you know, trying to drain a toilet, dishwasher, and the like. So there is an urgent message from the Sewerage and Water Board to stop using those appliances through the duration of this storm. That is the last thing anyone needs who is trying to hunker down in their house while the storm passes. And obviously what you can see are deteriorating conditions.
And Mike,
reporting live from the, oh yes.
Mike,
please.
Don't leave us yet. When I talked to Korban earlier today, He said that his big concern was the power going out from Entergy. Now we've seen it in the for the sewage pumps. What happens if they do go down for the drainage pumps?
Well, fortunately, and this is part of how the system is built, the primary power for the drainage pumps comes from those turbines, workhorse turbine number 5, and they just got back online yesterday, turbine number 4. That is the bare minimum to power the drainage pumps. All of that will be needed given the amount of rainfall that we're expecting. Now, we also, like I said, have heard those EMDs kick in. Those were brought in as backup power generation to add a little redundancy because of other turbines being out under repair. Those are now frontline sources of power.
And Mike, they mentioned
the more modern turbine. Now,
Mike,
they mentioned turbine number 6.
I'm sorry.
Operates on Entergy power, and that is at risk.
And Mike, they mentioned during the mayor's news conference that, Corban said to me this morning that they were going to try and move in some auxiliary generators to go ahead and power those sewage pumps.
Right. I think what happened, and we still need to get the details, we'll be reporting on this further. They haven't given a lot of detailed explanation into just what tripped, what breaker, which is located here at the plant. That's why we're here, connected to the Entergy power grid, somehow tripped, and a number of sewage pumps are now out of service. We don't know how many. We don't know the nature of that breaker being tripped, but we will ask those questions and get to the bottom of that. We still don't have an exact number of the location and number of sewage pumps being down, but that's going to affect the whole system because it all comes to one place right here at the Sewage and Water Board main plant. So by that citywide message encouraging everyone to stop the use of those appliances, I think they are in fear of that whole system backing up. It all drains to this sewage treatment here at the main plant, and that now is an additional risk that really I don't think they had planned on. We've never really talked about sewage, all the attention being on drainage, obviously. Now we have that problem to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the unexpected that gets you in situations like this. And Mike, it's worth noting too that one of those 5 EMDs that we know were brought in after the 2017 floods, one of those is down as well.
That's right. One of those is down and under repair. They have 4 apparently that are up and running. We're hearing one of them in the background right now. It's not a position that they wanted to be in when they brought those in for redundancy, but they're front line and critical to keeping the power going to drain those critical pumps all over the city.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. And Katie, you've done so many stories on this. You know the system very well. Sometimes we're running on just a prayer, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, we are. And I think that fingers are crossed. I think fingers, legs, arms, everything is crossed at this point, that they're going to be able to handle the influx of rainfall. We can hear it here in our Rampart Street studios right now. The rain's coming down already in Orleans Parish, and that's probably why they've had to activate those EMDs, in addition to the fact that they need some more power to power the pumps that get the sewage out of people's homes. And that's why the concern is that you could have a sewage backup, because if they can't pump it out to where it needs to go to be treated, then it's got nowhere to go. So the city basically is saying, you know, when I was a kid, they used to say, if it's yellow, let it mellow.
Yeah.
If it's brown, flush it down. I think that's kind of the situation that we're in the city. And, you know, I'm joking about that, but it's certainly a dangerous situation for people, because that's obviously a health hazard.
Yeah, and I'm looking online right now. There is some breaking news. The Mississippi Weather Network is reporting that the Mars deep water platform may have broken loose in this storm. So I'm sure we'll be checking in on that, but that according to the Mississippi Weather Network.
We're also starting to get some reports. Alexandra Cranford, she's of course at our location in Baton Rouge. She's tweeting some updates. She says Golden Meadow has power lines down, trees down, reported winds of 125 miles per hour. And we're also hearing Paul Murphy is also seeing some of the effects of this storm as well. He is in St. Bernard Parish, where there has already been some storm surge. So we're going to head over to Paul Murphy right now.
We are being pelted by heavy winds and rains here along Bayou Bienvenue in the Chalmette area. We are in probably the thick of it right here. The parish president, Guy McGinnis, did a video just a little while ago saying that the winds were already at about 65 miles per hour down on the eastern end of the parish. He is very worried about potential street flooding outside the levee protection. We've already seen some video from that area of levees being overtopped there, those ring levees. They're not the same as those federal levees that are in the New Orleans area. These are these earthen levees that help protect the fishing communities down there in eastern St. Bernard. And we saw some video a short while ago where some of them were actually being overtopped. And they have pumps in place to help pump that water out once this storm passes, of course. Earlier we spoke with Monty Montalongo, who is a former St. Bernard Parish councilman who now owns Parish Marina, about what he expected with this storm. I know this is early in the storm, but we're already seeing wind gusts at your place here at Parish Marina gusting up to 50 miles per hour, sustained winds of about 37 miles per hour. What is your expectation now with Ida?
I expect that we'll get 110 mile an hour winds over here. For Hurricane Zeta, we got 120 mile an hour wind, and it blew this back wall in. And we just recently replaced this back wall about 3 months ago. And like I say, Zeta blew the whole back wall in. And as you can tell, this building's moving pretty good right now. It's getting kind of scary. Somebody had called me and told me about the boat that's docked on the side of the building, and my son and I came here to move the boat, but there's no way we can move anything or make any more adjustments right now.
And taking a look at the seas here, you can only imagine what it's like outside the levee protection.
Oh, it's last I heard it was about 7 feet above normal outside the levee protection, and the winds are fierce. It's going to be really bad for the eastern part of St. Bernard Parish.
This is what you expected?
This is about what I expected. I figured about 100 mile an hour wind, but it looks like it may be a little bit worse than that.
Now, how's your place doing? I know downstairs there is some water coming in. Are you expecting to take on a little bit of water downstairs?
It's going to completely flood out downstairs. I got a small concession stand. I got the doors sandbagged on a concession stand. I got a pump running in there. We're going to sacrifice everything else underneath the building except this concession stand. If we keep electricity, we'll be able to keep the water out of that.
And we are back live. As you can see, the water coming in. This is Bayou Bienvenue. This is not the storm surge. This is what we're actually seeing inside the levee protection. So you can only imagine what it's like outside the levee protection, where I'm told that the storm surge is already in the 8 feet range, and it's expected to go anywhere between 8 to 12 feet in this area. Here at the Parish Marina, you can see that we were talking about what was going to happen to his concession area. You can see here it's already underwater. Just within the half hour since we talked to Mr. Montalongo, his area here underneath his building is already flooded, and that's probably what you're seeing across St. Bernard Parish right now. The real concern was outside the levee protection here. Most of the more populated areas of St. Bernard are inside the levee protection. They're going to be experiencing a lot of wind, which I am right here. I'm having to lean up against this pole so I'm not blown into the water here. So they're expecting some heavy winds, maybe up to 110, 115 miles per hour. So it is going to be a windy afternoon, windy evening here with a lot of rain, and it's just starting here. Now, we are also told that there are about 3,100 Entergy customers here in St. Bernard Parish currently without power. And that's the story here in St. Bernard. Paul Murphy, Eyewitness News.
Wow, Paul, you can tell that you're bracing yourself up against that pole. You're such a pro, and we really appreciate your reports and hope you stay safe.
All right, and we did talk about the Mississippi Weather Network, talking about the shells Mars Deepwater oil platform broken loose. Now, Katie, you just got some information that they may have retracted that?
Yes, there is some posts that are happening on social media saying that they're retracting that because they don't have enough information to confirm it. So that's something that has not been nailed down. So we want to make sure that we say that. That's important.
And that's the trouble with things like this. We have so many things going on at once, and it is hard to verify everything. You know, it is possible it happened. When you get a reputable source like the Mississippi Weather Network, you tend to believe it, but now they're retracting because they're not sure they can verify it.
Right. Well, we'll just have to make sure that we check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so many things are changing so quickly too. You just heard Paul Murphy say that storm surge is already in like the 8 feet range, and just 35 minutes ago, Alexandra was tweeting that at Shell Beach it was at 7.2 feet. So many things are going to be changing over even the next 30 minutes, next hour or so, that there's going to be a lot of updates to be shared.
And now we're getting reports that more than 200,000 homes are without power right now in Louisiana. And again, we're not even into the roughest part in the most populous part of the state yet. No,
although, Homa and the areas in Terrebonne Parish, just past Port Fourchon, where, of course, we saw this storm make landfall around 11:30 this morning. Those areas are really starting to feel the brunt of it. And so I think we're going to continue to see those outages increase as the day goes on. But even in random places, like you said, your house lost power uptown.
Yeah, just a few minutes ago. We were talking about, we were very worried about Homa before and Terrebonne Parish. Lafourche is getting really hit hard. All right, let's go to Jefferson Parish. They're having a news conference. Cynthia Lee Shang.
We have people there on Grand Isle. Our concern from the beginning has been this level of storm surge for that island and the people who chose to remain on it. We are in touch. We just were in touch with them. We're still via radio contact in touch with them. We were in touch with the fire station. The fire station is taking on water now. Now, what you're seeing in Grand Isle, you're going to start seeing coming up this way. So our attention is quickly on Lafitte, and the conditions will begin deteriorating and have deteriorated in Lafitte, and that is going to come up our way. So this is what we're looking at. Electrical outages, as you would imagine, are happening very frequently. Every time we check, it's probably gone up since I just last checked. 10 minutes ago, it's 46,000 that were out. We just checked right before I got to the podium. It was 54,000 customers without power. So this is what we are actually, expect for this kind of storm. So right here in Upper Jefferson, we will start feeling these impacts that the Lower Jefferson has starting to feel very quickly. And we're going to be at this for quite some time. We already had a Jefferson Parish leadership call this morning with over 100 participants, so we are in touch with our partners. We are in touch with our stakeholders. The communication channels are there so that we can respond very closely. Obviously, in Grand Isle, as I mentioned, our eyes are on them. We have gotten requests for rescue for people who stayed on the island, obviously, and I mentioned Whitecaps are on the highway. Our fire station's taking water. On Grand Isle, obviously, first responders cannot get to you. So those folks are just going to have to hunker down and wait for the storm to pass before it's safe and before we can get to them in Grand Isle. And also the concern, again, for Lafitte. I just saw the mayor. We are in touch with him in Lafitte. And they will begin seeing these conditions deteriorate rapidly. Was on the phone with Sheriff Joseph Lapinto. He is stationed on the East Bank. I want to thank him and his officers. They proactively went down to Lafitte, Lower Lafitte, Barataria, and Crown Point yesterday evening to identify, even though we had a mandatory evacuation, to identify people that are still in Lafitte. So I want to thank him for that. They went house to house with a few dozen officers, identifying people's names, their phone number, where they live, and the number of people in the house. So we want to thank him for that, and I thank, our first responders are so strong in Jefferson Parish, that proactive move, so they know immediately and are ahead of the game for search and rescue. Again, Upper Jefferson, the conditions will start to deteriorate rapidly. The threats that we have been saying you will start seeing them now, okay? So the wind, the rain, the flash flooding, and the overall power outages will happen. We've already had a report of an animal tied to a tree that our animal protection services have had to respond to. Animals need to be inside. We cannot pick up animals now. We are not going out, but all animals, if their lives are going to be spared, they need to be brought inside. And this animal is tied to a tree. So thank goodness we were able to rescue that animal before conditions worsened. If you're going to stay at home, please stay inside. Find the safest place in your home, an interior room, away from windows, away from skylight, away from glass doors, away from anything, projectiles flying outside that could break into your home that way. Understand how the trees are around your home. We expect a lot of fallen trees. A tree could fall on your house. You don't want to be in that location on your house. So you have to be strategic in where you're going to ride out this storm. We are prepared for post-storm recovery. Our teams are ready, our law enforcement officers, our firefighters, and we're so fortunate to have the Louisiana National Guard here to help our first responders out. I will tell you, this is a difficult time right now for these officers. They are used to responding. They're used to doing what they do best, and right now they're stuck just waiting. So I think what you're seeing all of us feel is a rush of adrenaline to try to do something, but we're stuck where we are right now. We have to wait this storm out, but the teams are ready and they're strategizing about how they are going to clear roads, get the roads accessible, and begin their assessment and their rescue. I want to just state something that we want to keep only life-threatening, very serious, very critical issues to our 911. So if it's life-threatening, it's down power lines, it's something very dangerous in our community, or if you are suffering from something that needs immediate attention, they're not going to be able to respond all the time during the storm, but it is appropriate to call 911. If it's a less critical issue, let's try to be smart about not overwhelming the 911 line. So if it's something having to do with a tree down, but it's not impacting the roadway, or as I said, animals, or just oxygen distribution, or some resources that you need, please call our Emergency Operations Center at 504-349-5360. Again, 911 for crisis situations, life-threatening situations, the less serious conditions, and we want to know everything. We're going to have teams out there assessing all the roads. So, if there's a tree down on a major road, don't bother to call. Our teams are going to get there. They're going to go look at those major highways. They know, they have a plan, so you don't have to call on that. But any less serious condition, let's keep it out of the 911 calls and call 504-349-5360. A reminder, we have no transit, no paratransit tomorrow. A reminder also that our offices are closed on Monday and the schools are closed on Monday. Okay, so with that, I'm going to invite up our Director of Emergency Management Services, Mr. Joe Valiente. And let me go back. I forgot to do this with my notes. Okay, so right now we have 54,000 power outages. Of course, all of the electricity is out on Grand Isle. All of the electricity is out in Lafitte. And now, this is growing, but on the West Bank, Estelle, Manhattan and Harvey, Woodmere, Terrytown, major outages. On the East Bank, Harahan, Elmwood, Jefferson, Metairie Terrace, Kenner, Airline, and around Lafreniere Park. I want to notice that acknowledge Councilman Templet, who just returned, and I don't know if I mentioned Senator Pat Connick is also here with us at the EOC. So you will hear from some members of our council in a little bit, but next up is our Director of Emergency Management, Mr. Joe Valiente.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll be brief. As you know, it was a Cat 4, 150 miles an hour when it made landfall at Port Fourchon, and now it's working its way toward the northwest, and it will severely impact the upper Jefferson Parish area. We've been working very closely with all our local partners in the levee districts and the flood protection agencies, and so we have a good handle. All of the flood gates have been closed and locked in hopes that we can minimize the amount of flooding that's going to occur. The threats that we've been talking about for 3 days are now a reality, and the risks are real. The wind, the rainfall, and the power outages. The majority of the power outages, we are being told, are being caused by trees that are falling. So again, the parish president mentioned that. Do not venture out and get anywhere near those trees and those power lines that are entangled in them. that's extremely dangerous. I just want to mention again that we have high water vehicles that are stationed in strategic locations, and the Louisiana Air National Guard and the West Bank Volunteer Fire Departments under Brian Adams will be coordinating their efforts for any search and rescue that occur afterwards. And I think it's important to mention that we have our essential duty employees are on standby and have been sheltered, and the moment that it's safe for them to get out and start their damage assessment runs, they will do so. And that is all I have to say. I do want to say real quickly, though, I said, now is not the time to become complacent. Stay with us for another 36 hours. Stay indoors. Don't venture out on the streets. And do not venture out after the storm passes. Give us time to get an assessment on what needs to be repaired and to get those roads open and those traffic lights up and running. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Next up, we will have our Director of Public Works, Mr. Mark Drews.
Thank you, Madam President. We'll start with drainage first. Right now, we're in very good shape. Fortunately, over the last 12 hours on the east and west bank, we've had basically 1 inch or less of rain. So all our canal levels are very low right now. We have full pumping capacity right now. And again, as a preemptive strategy, all our major pump stations we've already transferred to generator power so we can avoid the potential of loss of pumping capacity temporarily if we would have had an outage later. Similarly, we did the same thing with our 2 water plants because if we have that drop in pressure, it can have a detrimental effect on our hospitals. So our 2 plants are on generator power already, and they're performing fine. Our biggest issue, again, is also going to be the energy power outages. As we've said before, it is important that you stay off the streets because if your area doesn't have power, then those traffic signals do not work, okay? And we will not be able to attempt to restore any of our traffic signals probably until Monday. The same thing with our sewer system. Again, every time the power goes out, we have 500 small lift stations throughout the parish. So the areas where we have no power, those lift stations do not function. So we're asking right now that you please conserve the water that goes down your drain, which basically try not to do wash unless you need to or take long showers. Because even though you may have power in your area and your lift station is working, lift stations are interconnected. So you may be pumping to a lift station that is out. But other than that, Public Works is ready. We'll be ready to respond. As they said, we have people pre-positioned, so we will immediately go out, assess the damages, and start clearing our roads and streets so we can start the recovery process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Our next speaker is Chief Administrative Assistant Sarah Babcock.
Good afternoon. This morning we've been in close contact with all of our healthcare facilities. We already have multiple hospitals and nursing homes across the parish who are operating on generator power, but all of them are able to currently provide essential services and people are safe there. We've continue to remind everyone how full our hospitals are, and today we had a hospital in Region 3 that had to evacuate and move into the hospitals here in Jefferson Parish. So they are extra full at the moment, and so as Madam Parish President said, it is really important that we not go to the emergency room unless it is a life-threatening emergency. As I mentioned yesterday, after this storm, we will have oxygen tanks for distribution. If your oxygen tank is empty, you can bring it to these sites and we will replace it with a new one. These sites are not open today. They will only open after all of the streets are safe and the threat has passed, and so we will announce that opening when it comes. But these sites are Fire Station 20 at 4110 Hudson Street in Metairie and Fire Station 81 at 808 MacArthur Avenue in Harvey. We are also preparing to open shelters post-storm for people who need them. Just a reminder, these will be congregate settings in local recreation centers. It may not be luxury accommodations, but it will be there for people who need it. Anyone who has medical special needs needing a shelter will be transported outside of the region post-storm to areas in northern Louisiana to medical shelters there. If you believe that you will need to go to a shelter after the storm, please call 504-349-5360 and we will triage based on needs and assess whether or not it's appropriate for you to go to a shelter. We will continue to reiterate generator safety at every press conference throughout the storm because this is a high cause of death. Generators need to be set up outdoors, away from windows, doors, air conditioning units, and when you need to refuel them, please allow it to cool completely before adding more fuel. Also, if you're using generators right now, it may not be the safest time to go out and refuel in the middle of the storm, particularly if there are trees in your yard nearby. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. As I mentioned, our first responder communities are waiting for the time that they can go out and engage in search and rescue. As I mentioned before, Sheriff Joseph Lapinto is on the East Bank. Our fire chief, Chief Tibbetts, is on the East Bank. We also have the Louisiana National Guard here, and they'll work in conjunction with our West Bank Volunteer Fire Company. So with that, I want to introduce our Fire Services Director, Mr. Brian Adams.
Thank you. As the parish president said, tomorrow morning at daylight, we will get out and assist the other departments across the parish with clearing streets. So you'll see us out with chainsaws and just clearing the roadway. So if we need to get to an emergency, we can. We'll clear those roadways for us, the sheriff's office, our EMS service, and whatever it takes for us to get along the roadways. Also tomorrow morning at daylight, we will set up an area in Lafitte where we're going to be prepared just in case the water came up and we'll need to rescue people out of their homes or whatever may happen in Lafitte. So along with the National Guard, the Sheriff's Office, and our firefighters on the West Bank, as well as some of the members from the East Bank, we'll hit the ground ready to go tomorrow morning for those rescues. So with that, that's all we have. Stay inside, as everyone else has said up here today. I mean, stay inside. Give us time to get out there tomorrow and do what we have to do. Thank you.
Okay, obviously our council members is the governing authority in Jefferson Parish. We're very fortunate that they are working with us. Their staffs are out. They've been out all morning. So with that, our council chairman, Councilman Scott Walker, will address you, followed by Councilman at Large for Division B, Ricky Templett, and then Councilman for District 2, Dino Bonanno, and then Councilman for District 3, Councilman Byron Lee.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'll be brief. Again, there's not much more that I can say today that I haven't said in the past 2 days, except to repeat a couple of things. Here at the EOC in Gretna, we get a nice snapshot of what's going on in the parish. And what we see right now, as you've heard, is that Grand Isle and Lafitte are dealing with a lot, and they're going to continue to deal with a lot. And what they're dealing with now is going to affect us later in the day. So while it might not look terrible outside in Upper Jefferson right now, it will be terrible at some point in the day. So do not think that because this has made landfall and you're seeing Grand Isle and Lafitte get hammered, that you're not going to get affected later in the day as well. It is coming, and conditions will quickly deteriorate in Upper Jefferson Parish as the day moves on. We are here at the EOC. My fellow council members have been on the phone and on the internet and answering emails and monitoring social media, and that's what we're here to do. So if you have problems, contact us. We're here, we're listening, and we're ready to help you get through any troubles that you may have. But this is far from over. As Mr. Adams said, please stay inside. Don't make it more difficult on our first responders, and please stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. He spoke on behalf of our council members. As I mentioned, Councilman Edwards, I've been in touch with him in District 1, Councilman Van Rankin and Councilman Impastato on the East Bank, and they really should not be coming over to the West Bank right now. It is not safe conditions. So with that, does anybody have any questions? Sabrina?
Yes. Have you heard of any possible injuries in Brandau or in Lafitte?
It's difficult. No, we were in touch with our firefighters in Grand Isle. We were glad that we were still in touch with them, but everybody is inside, so it's a little bit too early to understand what's going on. Mayor Carmidel told me last night that in addition to some first responders that are on the island, he thinks that, you know, a total of 40 people are there. But everybody is, as I said, we're getting requests for rescue, but I do not know the status of those people, and I don't know if even they know the status of those people. The first responders on the island know that yet.
Have you been given any eye assessments of, you know, roofs blowing off or structures being heavily damaged?
Look, it looks very bad. We have a camera that was here at the EOC that was on the island. We lost that at 5 o'clock. Some of the council members were found cameras. It looks very, very difficult. We're seeing some private company cameras that we're finding, but the conditions are very, very bad right now in Grand Isle. They are really getting beaten up right at this moment. So.
And what about the water? How high is the water? Is it that fire station, I believe?
So the surge is very high. The roads have been impassable for a while. We did get reports early on, which we expected that, you know, they're used to storms. They've been through so many, but that water was coming in areas that normally don't even take on water. So, of course, this is a different storm. At the fire station, it crossed the road, and it's on the bottom floor of the fire station. But that's an open kind of area. Okay. Councilman Walker is saying we got reports at 6 feet on Highway 1, which is the only road in. Yes. And again, we probably won't be able to assess those conditions for quite some time on Grand Isle. Now, just a reminder, and we keep saying this, the secondary effects of this storm are just as dangerous. So right now in Upper Jefferson, we have not started seeing it. You know, conditions are starting to get worse, but it's going to be a long, long day. But please, please, our first responders are here and ready to do their job. We have to work as a community. Give them free access to the roads. Let them assess the roads. Let them get the trees off the roads. Let them assess for down power lines. Please do not go out. I know everybody's going to have cabin fever when this is all over with, but we have got to be smart about this. We have got to work together as a community, and we all say we support law enforcement and first responders. We need to show that action now. But if you don't have a critical issue, you're going to stay put and you're going to do your part for our first responders. They do not need extra people on the road. They do not need extra car accidents that don't need to happen. They do not need to be responding to any post-storm injury. Let them respond to the injuries that are happening during the storm. So this is my plea of you as a community. Let's give and work with our first responders, and let's stay out of their way so they can do their job, please.
No.
Any other questions?
But maybe it's got to be a minute.
Okay. Everybody be safe. Thank you very much. We will be in touch. Again, text 888-777. Text JP Alert to 888-777, or for our Spanish-speaking citizens, JP Noticias to 888-777, and we will be in touch with you on our next briefing. Thank you.
All right, you've been listening to a press conference from Jefferson Parish. They are down at the Emergency Operations Center in Gretna right now. They say that the power outages have begun. Most of them right now are in the Grand Isle area and the lower part of Jefferson Parish. Places like Lafitte, Barataria, conditions there are deteriorating. They talked a little bit about what Grand Isle has already seen. They had some pretty high winds there, very high winds there. Multiple people who did elect to stay on Grand Isle have called 911. But they don't know if those people were able to get help. There's about 40 people in total on the island. About half of them are first responders. And they say that those kind of conditions are going to be slowly moving north through Jefferson Parish. So even if it looks okay right now, stay home. This is the time to stay inside because things will be changing rapidly from here.
I think another thing that we heard from Jefferson Parish officials is that there's already 6 feet of water over Highway 1.
Yeah, so there's no way.
No way in and out. So, you know, those first responders who are on the island are really responsible for, are going to be responsible for getting those people out. But they said, you know, they sort of gave a warning about this 2 days ago that if you're going to stay, it may be a while before first responders can get to you because they cannot get to you when it's not safe.
Yeah, and this looks like we're showing Carrollton Avenue, one of our units driving down Carrollton. You can see all the limbs down, things like that.
Power is a huge problem already.
Yeah, and as Chris was mentioning earlier, Grand Isle just took a beating today with that wind. It was just amazing. just how much wind there was there. What did you say, Chris? Like 150 miles an hour.
That was the estimates from the hurricane hunters as they're continuing to fly into the center of the storm as it makes landfall. But our radar wind estimates, we use velocities to actually see what the wind speeds are, and it certainly looked like around Cocodritz, where we were looking at those cameras out at the Lumcon facility, we're at 130 miles an hour. So certainly 130, 130 to 150 we can verify. And you just see here in the city, and again, this is, as you mentioned, that's along St. Charles Avenue.
Carrollton, actually. That's Carrollton.
Carrollton, I apologize. They've only come up to about 40 miles an hour. Now, we are getting gusts up over 60 miles an hour, and that is also causing the damage. But right now, the sustained winds here in the city, in perspective, are not that bad, and they are going to get worse. We've been looking at our transmitter camera on the West Bank, looking back toward the city. I mean, it is rocking. Everything in our building is creaking. We're in the French Quarter, and so the winds are worsening and will continue to get worse as we go through the next few hours. Again, we are all under, on the South Shore down toward the coast, an extreme wind warning. We do not see those issued. That is almost like a giant tornado warning. So really, for the purposes of the landfalling storm, instead of trying to issue all of these warnings and the expectation of these sustained winds and wind gusts, the Weather Service has kind of done a rare feat of issuing an extreme wind warning. So you kind of treat it as if we were all under a giant tornado warning, meaning it is happening, and we are seeing those winds sustained of at least in the city now 40 to 50 miles an hour, and they are strengthening, and they will continue to strengthen over the course of the next few hours. As the storm made landfall in Port Fourchon, we do now see that the center is going to be passing this is the eye, not just the eye wall, which the eye wall has passed over Cocodrie, but the eye is going to be passing just to the east now of Cocodrie and continuing probably on a trajectory right near Terrio, but likely taking it directly over Homa and then toward Thibodaux. So it looks like they are going to see the worst of
Don't worry about it. I don't remember ever seeing that there. I love what you're saying. It's like always correcting it. Always trying to correct him.
I hate it when my watch tells me to breathe.
To what?
My watch tells me to breathe. Breathe. Fuck you.
Uh-oh. I just pressed F2, sorry.
Hello? Oh, not too bad, man. What's up? Let us, we're gonna do a hit, after the need to know. Yeah, no problem. All right, bye.
Yeah.
So someone would like you to do some stuff, whatever, after you do it, just for YouTube and whatever else is put up
What?
Oh, I'm just looking at somebody's like gunshots or Transformer. It's a new game.
It's time for a walk.
Harry has nothing to say.
So I'm talking about the center of the eye. As I mentioned, the outer eye wall is already approaching Homa at the moment, the Falgout Canal and around Cocodrie. And we were getting that update of the images from Cocodrie, and at some of our estimates, about 130 mile per hour winds. And we were still getting video images from Cocodrie, which I don't know what kind of a camera setup out there, but it is incredible. But this is the wind field that you really want to avoid, this outer eye wall, and even then more so the inner eye wall. So we can kind of widen out here a bit. I know folks in the city are a little more terrified as to what is moving our way. And you kind of see just the general motion of the storm. And this is only looking at an hour's worth of data. Still looks like it is moving northwest, but there have been little wobbles one way or another. And it little wobble back to the east may allow for this outer eye wall to get very, very close to the metro area.
And that's one of the things you fear, correct, Chris?
Absolutely. That's what you want to avoid.
Yeah, because right now it looks like Terrebonne is not getting it nearly as bad as Lafourche Parish.
Correct. At the moment. I'm going to go switch back over to our reflectivity to show you and put this into motion. So yeah, at the moment, you know, there are some areas, and it really is at times kind of a fine line as to just who is seeing the strongest winds and those that are not really feeling, well, much impacts, relatively speaking, with the storm itself. So yeah, Thibodaux, it's not bad, comparatively speaking, to what Homa is getting at the moment. You get out toward Morgan City, not bad at all. Now things have settled again, right at the center of the storm, at the eye, it is dead calm. There are no winds. You were at the center of the storm. You were at the area of lowest pressure. That is the center, and winds are dead calm at that point. But around Galliano, it looks like you are right now just getting into the inner eye wall, and that's where we've seen some of the strongest winds. So that's where you're going to see the 130 plus mile per hour winds sustained, and certainly higher gusts at those points. As this, again, you kind of just look at the entirety of the wind field, and I'm speaking from the outer and inner eye wall.
You're watching ABC 13 Eyewitness News, Houston's news leader. You're watching ABC 13 Eyewitness News, Houston's news leader. You're watching ABC 13 Eyewitness News, Houston's news leader.
Heeding those warnings to kind of stay safe and shelter in place.
And Tom, when you showed that tree down over the streetcar tracks, did it affect the line above the street?
It didn't look so right now, Eric, and it's hard to tell. I mean, we don't necessarily want to get out to kind of assess what's happening. We're just trying to give people a sense and a sample of what we're seeing here. And as we're coming up towards downtown on the left, we have another down tree near Willa Jean. If people are familiar with that restaurant right now, we are seeing kind of sporadic amounts of debris, especially along St. Charles, coming from the uptown area. Kind of sporadic amounts of debris, especially along St. Charles, coming from the uptown area into the downtown area. Nothing tremendous yet, and I'm just trying to give you a more accurate kind of picture and description of what we're seeing. What was disheartening, we did see several people that it seemed like they didn't have a home that were still under the Claiborne overpass. I hope that at some point they're going to be able to find some shelter. And oddly, we did see several people just kind of straggling around near that old CVS area near the Chase Bank on Carrollton, and that's very concerning in terms of what we may be seeing over the next hour or so, in the next few hours, with the more severe aspects of the weather that are going to come in here and affect this metro area.
And I'm surprised
and right
how
now
much
we're
power
heading
there is on downtown.
back towards the French Quarter. Yeah, and we also were out near the Metairie area, Kenner area, and there were patches of Metairie and Kenner that did seem to have traffic lights and lights out, but there were several areas too in Metairie and Kenner that did have and were maintaining power at this point, which is a positive sign. But again, as you had mentioned, we are not in the worst of it. These are just kind of the initial impacts that we're seeing. The gusts have been hitting the Mobile Forecast Center, have been strong, but nothing to the point where it's concerning. But we are trying to be very careful as we move around here and trying to heed the warnings, and we're not trying to be heroes out here at this point, for sure.
Ton, it sounded like one of those gusts just blew the roof off of our studios here on Rampart Street, so I imagine that it is whipping that Mobile Forecast Center around. One of the things that strikes me as I see you driving around is that we already have these trees down, and of course, we know what happens when those types of things block the storm drains. And we had city officials earlier today saying that if we get what is expected, meaning 3 inches of rain in an hour, that's a problem for the system without all that debris on the roads. Talk about that a little bit. Do you think that there's enough around that it could be an issue?
I do think it's going to be an issue, Katie, because as we're seeing now, I mean, these are just kind of the weaker bands and kind of the initial kind of waves of impact that we're seeing. And as we were trying and moving and maneuvering around St. Charles, we did start to see a good amount of debris collecting on there. Again, it wasn't overwhelming, but this isn't the strongest wave of impacts that we're seeing from Ida at this point. So I do believe that at some point, because there's so many trees that are kind of scattered throughout the city, that we're going to start seeing the debris collecting in those catch basins, and that will be certainly an issue for the drainage, which is always a major concern for us. But, just for comparison, I will say that we, as crews that did cover Katrina, this is a positive sign at this point. And again, I don't want to compare it completely to Katrina, but the initial impacts of Katrina, it was very hard for us to move in and around the metro area. But for this to be what we're seeing right now, it is a positive sign. But again, it's going to be very, very watched in the next few hours of what the impacts are going to do to this area and certainly west of us too, because from what I understand, Jefferson Parish and those western sides of JP and even Algiers as well might see more of a strong impact than they did during Katrina.
Looking at as you drive down Canal Street, there just seems to be very little debris or litter or anything on the road, and power on at every stoplight you've hit so far.
Yeah, and as was the case with Katrina before, this is kind of the setup place for all the major networks and the media networks, because this is one of the most well-known areas and they will be able to broadcast from here. But I'm just going to be quiet here just for a minute. If you can kind of hear the gusts hitting the mobile unit, it is telling because it's some of the areas that we're coming in, especially depending on where we are, you can hear the gusts coming here. But just as I mentioned it, things are calming down. But at least here on Canal Street, we're not seeing a tremendous amount of debris, but the further you get closer to Uptown, and our next stop is trying to check out Toulouse and Decatur because we heard there's some damage in that area. Will be interesting to see what we come up with and what we discovered there. But right now, at this point, the debris field that we've seen hasn't been overwhelming, which is a positive sign. But again, we were very, very early in the initial waves of impact from Ida here.
Ton, at what point do you decide, or you've been through many of these storms, you've covered many of these storms. At what point do you decide to pull the plug on driving around and just say, you know what, this is too much?
Oh, it's certainly when the winds start pummeling the mobile forecast center, we are going to pull aside next to a very secure structure and just shut down again. And as we're coming up here, let me just kind of cut off that thought here. We are now near Decatur, and you're starting to see another downed tree here near the west. And let me kind of, if we can pull up here, and you'll excuse me for a minute. We also have to wipe off the camera as well to give you a better shot. And this is a bit of new technology for me. I'm controlling the camera here, but here's another downed tree that we're encountering here as we're coming to the French Quarter, heading down towards Jackson Square.
We've heard some of the reports that are down there.
Near the west end here.
Do you know what you guys are about to run into down there? I know we've seen some reports, heard some reports that there might be a roof down at that intersection that you're headed to.
Yeah. Until we can put our eyes on it, we're not sure what we'll see. But we're hearing the same thing as you, that there could be a roof down in one of the establishments down here, which, for all intents and purposes right now, if we're dealing with wind damage, which is the big concern, I will say we're in fairly good shape. We haven't seen a tremendous amount of wind damage, but for any of us that went through Katrina, as long as we're not getting the waves and waves of rain and the heavy flooding, we'll get through this. And I hate to kind of compare those two aspects versus wind and flooding right now, but if we're dealing with wind damage, that's something that we can certainly manage. But flooding is certainly another issue here. And let me see what we're coming up on here, and you'll have to excuse me as we're just kind of, everybody's discovering this with us here. Let me pan down here. We have, it looks like another camera crew. Yeah. So Jeff is stopping right now. I'm going to pan the camera over here.
Wow.
We are near Cafe Beignet, and let me turn the camera over.
Oh my goodness.
Wipe that off. I apologize. I'm trying to familiarize myself here with the technology, but
can you see what that is, Tom?
We're going to try. We're also, I think that's part of a roof. It looks like a part of a collapsed balcony.
Okay.
On this establishment here. I'm not sure. I apologize here. I'm not sure what the name of that establishment is, but we're near Decatur and Toulouse.
It could have been an awning or something, or maybe
near Perlis. Yeah. It looks like it is an awning, and I don't necessarily know where that originated and came from, but Jeff, if you want to pull up a little bit further, let's try to get another angle on this. Okay. Let me turn back here.
See all the media crews covering it, of course wanting to get pictures of the damage as it's happening, just like we are. But that is certainly a sight to see. Is it not, Ton?
It is, and I apologize, Katie. I'm trying to maneuver the camera to give you a better view of this here as much as I can, but yeah, it looks like it's part of an awning that came from at least the Toulouse side or the Decatur side. And again, we are just figuring this out. I'm not sure. And the difficult part in these situations that we're just rolling up on this, and sometimes it's not always helpful for me to kind of make assumptions here. But the best I can do is describe what I'm seeing. And so far, this is probably the most dramatic footage that we're seeing. And if nothing else, it's a good glimpse of how media reacts to this, because again, this is the worst that we're seeing right now. We're in good shape. We don't have any reports of injuries on this, but again, I can't verify if anybody was injured on this, because at this point we don't have a lot of communication when any of the first responders, they are not out here. And that's a good reminder for people too, that as you're dealing and kind of getting through this storm, to stay inside, because in this case, many of the first responders are not going to be outside and able to respond to the areas. And again, I don't want to be the person popping out and trying to check on this, because I don't feel necessarily safe getting near debris as we're dealing with these conditions. The other crews can do that, but we are choosing not to.
Yeah, but that's probably the wisest move.
Yeah, Erica, and what we're trying to do in many cases here, and I think for the folks at home, we are always concerned about our neighborhood and getting a sense of where the damage is. And many of us who went through previous storms, certainly through Katrina, ultimately that's what we understand the audience needs, is to kind of understand the context of what the storm is doing around the city. Many of us understandably want to know what's happening in our neighborhoods and on our streets, and to make sure that our home is safe. That is what we're trying to do as much as we can. If we can put this on the streaming portion of our website, we just want to give people an idea of what is happening in their neighborhood, in their city.
Well, you want to
get
report
in and
the
around
story.
the metro area as much as possible.
You want to report the story and not be part of it. Anyway, the governor is having a news conference right now.
And obviously we have a very dangerous situation on our hands with Hurricane Ida. And we can expect devastating impacts to continue for most of the next 24 hours or so as the hurricane passes through the state. As most of you are probably aware by now, a couple of hours ago, Hurricane Ida made landfall officially at Port Fourchon as a Category 4 hurricane with sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. As predicted by the National Weather Service, this is one of the strongest storms to make landfall here in modern times. And as had been projected, Ida rapidly intensified at an unprecedented rate right up until landfall. And the fact of the matter is, an extremely strong Category 4 storm or a Category 5 storm, it doesn't really make much difference. I think there's, 5 or 6, 7 miles per hour difference between the winds that were measured on Hurricane Ida and a Category 5 storm. By now, if you're in Ida's path and you've not already begun to feel severe weather, we can just about absolutely assure you that you soon will. If you're sheltering in place, please make sure that you're in the most secure place possible in your home, some interior space, and then please make it your business to stay there until the danger passes. And because of the possibility that severe winds will damage your home, it is a good idea to have a mattress nearby that you can use to put over yourself and other family members to protect you from any falling debris. We urge you not to be tempted to go outside, to take a look and start sightseeing, and for goodness sake, don't drive around right now. It just isn't worth it. The same really goes by for the immediate aftermath of the storm after it's passed by, because there will be down power lines, there's going to be standing water, there's going to be debris, other dangers, and quite frankly, we can't tell you yet how soon it will be before first responders are going to be able to respond to calls for assistance. So please don't go out. And the extent to which individuals decide to get out and about will inhibit the flow of first responders and search and rescue assets, high water vehicles, and so forth. So please be patient. Once the storm has passed, you need to be prepared to shelter in place for the first 72 hours. We have every possible resource ready to go to help you. We'll get there sooner than 72 hours, if at all possible, in order to rescue people across the state of Louisiana. But this is the window of time that it may take in order to get first responders to you, depending upon conditions. You should know that the entirety of the Louisiana National Guard has been activated, and currently more than 4,900 guardsmen are out in support of current operations. Just on the search and rescue assets of the National Guard, they're staged across 14 parishes. They have 195 high water vehicles, 73 boats, and 34 helicopters ready to support and assist the citizens of Louisiana. There remain 169 wildlife and fishery agents with trucks and boats in the same number in order to do search and rescue. And the most robust search and rescue effort that we have consists of more than 900 individuals making up 21 teams that are represented by 16 different states. And the numbers that I just gave you include the Louisiana State Fire Marshal's Office and their boats. The Department of Transportation has assembled 164 coaches and 20 paratransit vehicles. 185 coaches will be available by tomorrow morning. The Department of Corrections, our prisons have produced more than 34,000 sandbags for communities across South Louisiana. They've also completed the evacuation of 2,500 inmates from 7 local jails, those being Acadia, Orleans, Plaquemines, St. Mary, St. Bernard, Vermilion, and Terrebonne parishes. The CPRA continues to monitor gates across the coastal zone. As of a little earlier today, a total of 459 gates out of 692 are closed. That's up 246 since the briefing yesterday. All of our hurricane protection systems have been have been completely closed, and all structures are fully operational at this time. As late as this morning, additional protection measures were being undertaken by levee districts, such as the South Lafourche Levee District. They actually completed sheet pile and sandbagging operations to address low areas ahead of the storm. Based on the hurricane track and the wind, rain, and surge forecast for the remainder of the hurricane, the CPRA is anticipating some overtopping of the southeast portions of the LaRose to Golden Meadow levee system, non-federal back levees around Middle Grove and Alliance in Plaquemines Parish, and non-federal levees in Lower St. Bernard Parish as well. And obviously overtopping is concerning, but I want to make sure that everybody understands overtopping and levee failure are not the same thing. And a levee failure can be much more catastrophic, and so they are not the same thing. Obviously, we're going to continue to monitor this flood protection system. I can tell you right now, we do not anticipate any overtopping of the Mississippi River levees or overtopping of the levees in the hurricane risk reduction system around the greater New Orleans area. Clearly, you've seen the reports, and up until a short while ago, I was able to look at live video feeds. There are very significant storm surge impacts around Port Fourchon and Grand Isle, as well as in Plaquemines Parish near Point Lahash and Braithwaite. CPRA has pre-staged pumps throughout southeast Louisiana and will deploy flood fighting assets to coastal parishes in need of dewatering as soon as it is safe to do so. This is obviously a very fluid situation. It is rapidly changing, and that's why everyone needs to stay abreast by listening to news and following the guidance from your local officials. Really, nobody in southeast Louisiana should be out on the roads, but if travel becomes absolutely necessary after the storm, please proceed with extreme caution. There will be hazards out there that you may experience before any law enforcement or DOTD personnel or anybody else may be able to get to first and warn you about it. This is especially true of debris, downed power lines, and standing water. Please check 511la.org for road closures, and please don't drive through standing water. That's how we lose an awful lot of people after storms. Many parishes are announcing curfews as we speak, so all Louisianans should follow the directives of their local leaders, which are obviously designed to keep us all safe. And the conditions vary by parish, and they have different considerations in mind. And so please honor these curfews and avoid needless risk to your own safety and that of your family. And please, again, keep streets clear for emergency responders. If you have evacuated, don't be tempted tomorrow to return before you know that it is okay for you to do so. Please contact your Office of Emergency Preparedness or monitor any announcements that they have as to whether it is the right time for you to return. The last count that I had shortly before coming over here is we have 1,542 individuals being sheltered across the state. That is in at least 23 different shelters. The vast majority of those are being operated by parishes. Obviously, we expect this number to increase throughout the day and potentially in the days to come as people discover that their homes are no longer habitable. For the latest shelter information, text LA Shelter to 898-211, or you can call 211. Heed the guidance of local officials. Local officials will have the most up-to-date shelter information for a specific area or parish. As we have mentioned several times before, if you lose electricity and you decide to use a generator, it is imperative that you follow the instructions from the manufacturer. Please make sure that generator is well away from your home in a well-ventilated area. It should not be inside, shouldn't be in a garage or a crawl space, under a window or a vent. And on occasion, you'll need to refuel the generator. Please make sure that you allow it to cool off for at least 20 minutes before doing so. In closing, and before I take some questions, there is no doubt that the coming days and weeks are going to be extremely difficult for our state. And many, many people are going to be tested in ways that we can only imagine today. But I can also tell you that as a state, we've never been more prepared. Again, all the models that we've seen from the Army Corps of Engineers and from our own CPRA show that the Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction System will hold and perform as intended. Will it be tested? Yes. But it was built for this moment. I have a tremendous amount of confidence in the team that we've assembled at the state level, all the local officials and first responders and our federal partners. And by the way, I want to thank FEMA Regional Administrator Tony Robinson from coming out of Texas to embed with us here. And I can tell you that a short while ago, I had a call with Administrator Criswell of FEMA in Washington, and she is very closely watching what's happening here, coordinating with us, and already has various things en route so that we can employ them just as soon as possible, things like generators and so forth. So I have a tremendous amount of confidence in our team, all the state and local officials and our federal partners. But I want you to know I also have confidence in the people of Louisiana. They always continue to inspire me with their goodness and their decency and their generosity. And I know that they're going to do everything they can to protect themselves and their families and their neighbors, especially those who may have special needs. Maybe they're elderly, so forth. Please make sure that you check on them and stay safe. And I know it may not seem this way right now for many people out there across our state, but there is always light after darkness, and I can assure you we're going to get through this. And I do invite everyone to offer up a prayer for our state, for the people of our state, that we get through this just as soon as possible and in the best possible shape with the least loss of life. You know, property is replaceable. Lives are not. So that is obviously our first order of priority. So I'm going to stop there and take a few questions, and please feel free to direct your questions to any of the people that we have assembled here And depending on what you ask me, I may ask them to come up and answer the question anyway. Yes.
I think you spoke before, but could you talk about how long it will take to respond to those right now?
Yeah. It's weather dependent, and quite frankly, before the weather gets good enough for us to respond, it's going to also be dark. So what I can tell you is our expectation is that we will be ready at first light tomorrow morning to go out to those areas that we know already have received the most damaging impacts from the storm, principally wind and storm surge. You mentioned Grand Isle. I can tell you that the video that I've seen and the reports that I've received are just tremendous amounts of storm surge there and wind damage. The good news is, I hesitate to give you a figure, but something like 98% of Grand Isle evacuated. And the people who were there, I believe, stayed back in structures that are specifically designed and built to withstand these types of forces. But I have no doubt we're going to see extreme devastation, Grand Isle and elsewhere. But we will likely be sometime after first light tomorrow morning before we can get up in the air and get vehicles down there. And of course, you got to travel LA1. I don't know if you saw the video, but LA1 was not in good shape in the Leeville area earlier. So we will be working that just as quickly as we possibly can, and in all likelihood traveling to Grand Isle and elsewhere in that vicinity via helicopter.
Do you have any information as to the status of hospitals?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I can tell you no Tier 1 hospitals have been evacuated. Now, Tier 1 hospital is what we commonly think of as a hospital. By definition, we have some rehab hospitals, we have some behavioral health hospitals, and these are typically much smaller, and the patient's needs are not quite as acute. And we have evacuated 4 such hospitals. And since I'm on it, I'll tell you we've evacuated 22 nursing homes, 18 assisted living facilities, and 61 intermediate care facilities as well. No hospitals have been evacuated, the Tier 1 hospitals, because quite simply put, there's nowhere to bring those individuals. They're in a hospital because they need that setting, and we don't have the capacity elsewhere. I mentioned yesterday that over the previous 11 days or so, we've been able to achieve a 20% reduction in our COVID inpatient census across the state of Louisiana. The good news is almost all of that happened in southeast Louisiana. But there's still 2,450 COVID patients in our hospitals across the state, in addition to all the other patients that remain in our hospitals. And that is a much higher number than we ever experienced in the first 3 surges. And so it's still a very daunting situation. And quite frankly, we're concerned, as we have been for a long time, about staffing. But these storms have an impact on staffing too, in terms of do they have to evacuate with their family for some reason? Does their home remain habitable so that they can live at home and go to work? And so we've got an awful lot of work to do. But we will have no higher priority than to make sure that our hospitals can remain in operation and functional. And that's going to be a challenge because we expect widespread power outage for some time. But we know that they have generators. We know that they have stocked up on fuel and water and food and on pharmaceuticals, things like oxygen and so forth. But quite frankly, we know that the longer the power stays out, the more challenging this is going to be. And the more devastation in an area, the harder it's going to be for them to have the staffing that they need. And, one of the challenges that we're having is we actually had additional staff coming in from out of state yesterday pursuant to contracts that we have executed. And the staff wasn't able to get in and because they didn't have any place to stay. There wasn't a hotel room open anywhere. And so that was a real challenge. And so I guess I say those things just to point out that their challenges are going to manifest themselves in ways that we can't even imagine now. But we have a great team here and across the state locally, and we're going to do everything that we can to prepare for every contingency that we can come up with right now. But this is going to be a very, very challenging situation. Yes, ma'am.
On the subject of hospitals, are the hospitals in New Orleans impacted at all by the pumps that went down today? Will that affect them?
I'm sorry, about the what that went down?
Pumps.
Oh, yeah. We have not received any word that any of the hospitals are having any challenges at the moment. And I can tell you, I had a conversation with many of the CEOs of the largest hospitals. They really felt like that they were more prepared than they probably have ever been for a hurricane. But that doesn't mean that they won't have significant challenges. But as I stand here before you, I have not heard that there's any situation with respect to those hospitals because of any pumps or power issues.
All right, we're going to head over now to Chris Franklin, who has an update on the weather here as we are seeing the storm head closer to New Orleans.
Yes, and as expected, we've been talking about for the last several days that due to the fact that we're going to find ourselves on the eastern side and more so the northeastern quadrant of the storm, the worst side, that we are going to see numerous tornado warnings issued. Now, not all of them will be able to be verified by the National Weather Service because we're going to see the strong winds and heavy rainfall kind of diluting the damage in a sense, and that's how these are actually determined because radar is indicating what may be a tornado kind of racing across Harrison into Hancock County, and then that might continue north of Picayune into Pearl River County, so along I-59. And again, these storms are racing. I'm actually read the text from the National Weather Service just to give you an idea of what we're looking at. This is about 7 miles or so northeast of Kill, and then about 7 miles north of Diamond Head and moving northwest at 50 miles an hour. The radar is indicating rotation. So again, this is not an observed tornado. And I've also said we're probably going to see dozens of these throughout the course of the afternoon, evening, and into the overnight. But what we see here is rotation being depicted on radar of a tornado that could be moving. This is north of Bay St. Louis, north of Kill, and that is moving up toward the area, generally north of Picayune, and it is moving. So if you're in its path, you need to take shelter now, but it is moving at 50 miles per hour. We can also switch over to our velocities to give you an idea of what the winds are doing, and we kind of better analyze this storm. Boy, the winds here sounds like a tornado's outside. And again, that was the reason for that excessive wind warning that we've seen issued for almost all of the South Shore. What you see here is the bright blues and greens kind of almost coupled together, that we might be seeing a little bit of rotation right in through here. So right in through this area might be where that rotation is showing up, and that is kind of racing up areas north of Picayune. Now, thankfully, it does look like our radar data kind of goes in and out here. I don't know if this is all storm related or not, but all right, we're getting a new pass from the radar beam. Okay, so it looks like right about through here, this is moving at a very rapid clip up to the northwest at about 50 miles per hour, and that's going to be the deal. These storms are going to start moving in. The radar might depict some rotation, but they are moving so quickly. If there is a warning that is issued, unfortunately, you don't have a whole lot of lead time, as it is going to be racing across, generally 50, maybe even faster speeds as the storm continues to move inland. There's just the nature of these hurricanes with that broad rotation. As these feeder bands start coming in within those bands and within individual cells, you may briefly get some rotation that will warrant a warning to be issued. Now, again, this is not a confirmed or observed tornado, but one that has been depicted by radar, and radar actually has tools that will look at that wind shear and that low-level shear and depict that there is likely a tornado on the ground. So you just have to assume that there is. Thankfully, it appears, and we'll zoom in a little bit more into this portion of Mississippi, it does look like it's in a rather unpopulated area, so it doesn't look like it would be affecting too many folks. But if you're in Harrison and then into Hancock County, so it looks like maybe right around, this is kind of the area that we're talking about, right in through here where you see the blues and greens. This is that little couplet I was talking about. It looks like it's moving toward Highway 603, is going to continue in the direction of Picayune, but staying north of Picayune, it appears, and it is moving at about 50 miles per hour. As I've said, we are going to see dozens of these over the course. You know, you look at radar, it doesn't look like much. When you get a better analysis of the winds, there is definitely a little bit of rotation there, and that's what the Weather Service is depicting. So what appears to be an almost innocent little shower that is moving through, but a heavy downpour nonetheless. What is moving through, it doesn't have any kind of the signatures that we would look for in terms of severe weather. This is kind of a different setup. These are usually fairly weak, short-lived tornadoes, but tornadoes nonetheless. But it usually is on more of the lower end of the EF scale, usually an EF 0 or 1. And I will say the maximum sustained winds that we're seeing down along the coast are going to be far greater than what any kind of smaller tornado may develop if it does move in and out of certain spots within the broad rotation of the storm itself. So we'll talk more about that, or just to again highlight these areas where these tornado warnings are going to be issued. And just a quick radar update, the storm is getting closer and closer. It looks like Galliano now in on the northeastern eye wall. This is the inner eye wall. This is that outer eye wall. It does look like, at least in the last few passes of radar, and I'm going to widen out here and we're going to zoom, or I'm going to kind of animate this, going back in time. It does look like we might be starting to see that. Is that another warning or just a continuation of the warning? Oh, just that they're continuing the warning. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so what we're looking at with regard to with Ida as it continues to move inland, it did slow down. The 2 o'clock advisory did have the forward motion northwest at about 12 miles an hour, so it has slowed down a little bit. But you're looking at the outer eye wall, which Eric Paulson has a friend that is staying put in Homa, and he's been reporting back to us some of his wind gusts. And so far, the wind gusts have been, while high, somewhat manageable. We've been looking at wind gusts of, Eric, I don't know if you, of 90 miles an hour, but the sustained winds have been less than that. So as they are right now in more of the outer eye wall, and sometimes that on the ground information is vital to us. All we can really do is sometimes estimate. Sometimes a lot of those surface-based observation stations are not manned by a human. They're just placed and left alone, and if they do encounter any kind of damage or loss of data, sometimes it may take us a little while to realize that there is no data that's being updated, or it is incorrect data. But sometimes just having eyes on the ground is really what we need. And if we can kind of verify that winds within this outer eye wall are gusting up to 90 miles an hour, then that's likely what we can expect to see up toward Gray, Thibodaux, as the eye wall continues to move up toward des Allemands and points north into the river parishes. Now, the inner eye wall likely has stronger winds. Again, just based on some of the estimates of what we have seen in the inner eye wall, it was around 130 miles an hour at Cocodrie. When we talk about the eye or the center of the storm having maximum sustained winds of 150 miles an hour at landfall, that usually does not mean you're going to find maximum sustained winds within the entire eye wall. It's usually one point that the hurricane hunters can find that maximum sustained wind. It does not mean it's a uniform wind speed. Far from it. It usually may just be one specific area. So as I was kind of highlighting the storm and kind of analyzing with the velocities of the wind speeds at the center of the storm, I was really struggling to find any location that had 150 mile per hour. Most of them were in the 130 range, which is still a devastating wind speed, no question about it. But it does look like, at least based on some of the observations that we're making, radar data kind of keeps going in and out here. Don't know if it's related to the storm. Our radar site is up in Slidell, but it does look like we can probably expect maybe 70 mile per hour sustained winds gusting up to 90 within the outer eye wall. And speaking of Cocodrie, as I'd said, we'd estimated wind speeds of 130 miles an hour, and I was praising the folks out at LumCon for their cameras. About 1 o'clock, I was looking at some of the images from their camera network, and then right before 2 o'clock, they all went dead. So we've lost the camera footage that was coming out, or the live camera stream out of Cocodrie that we're using just to see that inundation of water. I'm kind of working on a graphic here. I was looking at some of the surge numbers as we can look at some of the real-time data along the coastline, and we're kind of working on a graphic right now and looking at the surge numbers. You know, it's going to get higher, but right now at Port Fourchon, the water level looks like it got up to about 3 feet. So that was the surge that they saw in Port Fourchon, 3 feet. Grand Isle, it peaked at about about 4 and approaching 5 foot is what we had observed in, let's see, that new alert from the National Weather Service as I'm talking. Okay, they've canceled the tornado warning. Again, sometimes these are going to be usually fairly quick. They tend not to last for very long, and thankfully, it looked like whatever rotation was there was no longer apparent on radar. So that's some good news for the folks in Mississippi. But that's only the first of, well, actually, I think the second. I think we had one earlier this morning, of many that we are going to see throughout the afternoon and evening. And they are going to move very quickly. And as I said, we sometimes don't get a whole lot of warning because these will spin up very, very rapidly. But as I was mentioning, I'm kind of looking at some of the data here of some of these inundation or these stations that are reporting inundation numbers, and the observed height at Grand Isle has so far only been 4.87 feet. And we were talking about when we were looking at those cameras in Cocodrie, we could see some of the buildings just across the street there from the facility, and at ground level there was certainly some high water, but it did not appear to be at a great height. So it looks like most of these locations, and again, as of now, this is still pumping in that water. This is still sending in the storm surge. So the surge numbers will likely increase. However, it's been just very interesting to look at some of these observations. It almost looks like Grand Isle, the numbers are starting to fall. The water level is starting to fall. Same at Port Fourchon. The numbers are beginning to drop. So just something to note. It looks like we did see the levels at let's see, right around Southwest Pass, get up to about 4 feet or so. And then around Shell Beach, it looked like the water levels have kind of peaked at about 6.8. So we've actually seen water levels in terms of a surge a bit higher to the east of the mouth of the river as opposed to those points west of the mouth of the river and along the southern coast. So we will kind of reanalyze that as we continue through the afternoon to see if these surge numbers can indeed be confirmed, which again, if they can be confirmed, that is good news. So if our producers want to tell me where we're going to go from here, I don't know if we want to go back to the governor as again, that tornado warning. Okay, we're going to toss things back to the anchors. Again, the storm moving inland. If there is any good news, it looks like from actual observations from a friend of Eric's is that wind gusts, while very high and will cause some damage, have been at about 90 miles per hour within this outer eye wall. And if your friend wants to report back once they start to get into the inner eye wall, we'll get a little bit better estimate of what the winds are doing there. Hopefully we are starting to see the storm as it does start to interact more with land and the center comes in contact with more land. We should begin to see that wind field, the maximum sustained winds, begin to shrink a bit, and hopefully the storm will continue to weaken through the next several hours.
Your lips to God's ears, right?
Well,
I hope so.
And Chris, my friend at home, just sent me some video. He must be in that in-between part between the outer and the inner, because it doesn't look bad down there at all right now.
So, yeah, okay, so where he is in Homa, and okay, this is the latest image from radar. So, yeah, he might find himself kind of either where the wind and the rain is starting to subside a bit. And yeah, the winds are going to go fairly light in between these two eye walls. And then once he gets into this is likely going to be a bit stronger. So I'm curious as to what his observations will be in the next few minutes or so. Because this won't be long. Again, it's moving about 12 miles an hour. So a little while longer, he'll be into the inner eye wall. Which looks like it has been weakening, thankfully.
Yeah.
That is good news.
Yeah, that is good news. All right, thank you, Chris. And one of the areas, of course, that is expected to see significant impacts from this, that is already seeing significant impacts. We saw Paul Murphy getting thrown around by the winds earlier today, and he's joining us live with the latest now from St. Bernard Parish. Paul, how are conditions where you are now?
Katie, we just got some news a short time ago that we've been talking with folks about the possibility that a ferry had gotten loose from its moorings on the Mississippi River. We just confirmed that from Parish President Guy McGinnis. We talked to him a short time ago.
We got a report from our Homeland Security Director, John Ram. He made a phone call to the Coast Guard. There's a ferry, I believe it's the Chalmette ferry. There have been reports that it was the RTA pedestrian ferry that broke loose and is being pushed upstream by the wind, and there's nothing that can be done at this moment, but obviously we got a ferry in the river.
And the RTA pedestrian ferries park right across the river in Lower Coast Algiers, right across from the ferry landing. So right now we are trying to get some more information about that for you from the RTA, which we talked to the spokesperson for the RTA just a short time ago as well, and she's in the process of trying to gather some information about that. So in terms of where that boat is, we know that it is drifting upstream. We know that it's near mile marker 90. What we don't know is how close it is to the levees. I know that some folks on social media have been asking me, is this boat going to ram the levees? Well, we just don't know, and at this point it's some early reporting on this, so we don't want to get ahead of the story here. We're double checking, we're getting some more information from the RTA, and once we get that, we'll be back on the air with that. Now, as for the rest of St. Bernard Parish, if you look behind me, you can see that it is really coming down. The rain is really coming down. We got that sideways rain that you see that are accompanying these tropical hurricane type storms. We were expecting winds of more than 100 miles per hour. You can see across the street there's actually some small branches rolling down the street here. A lot of rain, a lot of wind. And as for the areas of St. Bernard Parish that are outside the levee protection, we're told that the storm surge is coming up. They were expecting the storm surge to be anywhere between 8 and 12 feet. So that would certainly put water back up on the road in places like Delacroix and places like Waclawski and Shell Beach. And that, we're told, is happening at this point. The water has made its way all the way up to the rock dam on the Florissant Highway, and we haven't heard about any water on LA 46 just yet. Inside the levee protection here in St. Bernard, things appear to be holding. Folks are staying home. The only vehicles that we've seen out on the road lately have been sheriff's deputies, so that's a good thing. So it's still watching and waiting to see how much is damage, how many impacts from Ida we're going to see here in St. Bernard. And once that storm moves, the parish government is poised to spring into action and get out there and start clearing up these roads. And we're told that there are some downed trees. There are 3,100 as last count of customers, Entergy customers without power down here, and that number will likely grow throughout the day. And that's the story here in St. Bernard Parish. Paul Murphy, Eyewitness News.
All right, thank you, Paul. We hope that you have somewhere very safe to go whenever this kicks up even more.
Yeah. And we are having issues in St. Charles Parish. Let's get over to there. People are in emergency shelters in St. Charles, and William Joy talked with some of them.
Right now, we are at a community center in St. Charles Parish, which has been set up as one of 2 shelters of last resort for people here in the parish to take shelter from this storm. We got here around 10 a.m. There was a steady flow of people coming in to take shelter, but since then, it seems like everybody who is going to make this the place where they wait out their storm has already gotten here. We went to a middle school earlier where there were maybe a couple families, but here, there are about 30 people maybe who have decided to take shelter here. Right now, the winds have started to pick up a little bit. There's maybe a sprinkle of rain, but nothing compared to what we will be seeing later on. Some of these families said they just made the decision this morning because they got calls from other concerned family members. Others said past experiences are what led them to decide that they did not want to wait out this storm in their home or their trailers or wherever they were living at. I talked to Rudy Johnson earlier, who said he has experienced too many hurricanes before to decide to not seek shelter. Take a listen.
I feel fine. I feel fine. I'm still prayed up. I'm trusting, leaning, depending on Jesus, because He said, "Put your trust in Him, and He's gonna direct my path." So that's all I could do. Lean and depend on Him.
At what point did you decide, hey, I need to come to this shelter, I need to seek help?
Well, we was in Kelowna, and I know I was in a mobile home, and I don't have no good support in the mobile home. And they told us, RVs and trailers, you got to get out of there. So I was in another building, and the building is not too secure. We thought it was stable, so they told us we had to get out of there. So they said something about Texas. I said, oh no, I said, going to have too much contract flow on Texas. So they opened this shelter up, opened this building up for a shelter. So we decided to come here.
I saw people coming in with everything from ice chests, little kids with pillows, blankets, food. What all did you guys try to bring with you? Because I know you're here with several family members.
Oh, I got cooked food. I got sandwich food. I got snacks. Got drinks. I'm prepared. I'm not only going to last. I hope I don't have to stay here. I got enough stuff to last me but 2-3 days.
You were telling me earlier you've been through this. You've been through a lot of hurricanes already in the past. And how closely have you been watching this one compared to others?
I've been following this up since the beginning. And as this thing starts getting stronger and stronger, and it starts getting intensified, and Bessie was 130 miles an hour back in the day. I rode that. I rode Camille out. Now, see if I get a chance, I'll never stay around no more, ride no more out. I'm looking for safety.
Yeah. So you've been there, done that. So you decided the shelter is the way to go.
That's right. That's right. That's the way to go.
The wind's picked up a little bit here in just the last little bit. You can see kind of some of the bushes pushing somewhat. But how what's on the path here? Obviously, how concerned are you about what's headed here?
Well, what's headed here, I don't want to be no part of it. Because they tell you got 5 cents to get us on way, and I won't do it because see that wind is terrible, and I know water is powerful too. I don't want to have no connection with either one of them unless I'm drinking it or taking a bath in it.
I know you said you're here with a lot of family. Did you guys talk early this morning and make the call, hey, we're all coming? I mean, how did that kind of play out for the family?
Well, they all us stayed together. Family stayed together, prayers together, stays together. Got some of my family right here. I got my daughter and my sister-in-law right there, all us together.
You talked about prayers. You said you're in a mobile home. You know what this kind of wind can do to homes like that, to trailers. What are you thinking right now about what you may end up coming back to after you're done here?
Well, I'm just hoping for the best. Might be the worst, but I'm hoping for the best, hoping nothing don't happen. You will have to start all over again.
Now, to give you some perspective, that warehouse that you're looking at over there is really where we're expecting this storm to come through and deliver heavy winds and heavy rain as well. The storm surge is another real concern here because we don't have the same level of levee protection that New Orleans does. So as Rudy talked about, that water is really why a lot of people are evacuating as well. Another thing you need to know about this shelter, there are no supplies here. I mean, we're seeing people come in with crates of ice. People coming in, as Rudy talked about, with food, with snacks, kids with pillows under their arms. A lot of families that have shown up as well. Like I said, about 30 people that I've seen come in so far. This could be a place where they end up waiting out the storm, certainly through its strongest winds, through the strongest rain, but they don't know what they're going to be going back to by the time this is all said and done. In St. Charles Parish, for Eyewitness News, I'm William Joy.
All right, William, thank you.
Yeah, certainly a situation to watch there. Something else that's on a lot of people's minds here in the metro area is this situation with the Sewage and Water Board, particularly their request to conserve water because of the sewage pumps, and then also whether or not they're going to have enough power to power the drainage pumps. David Hammer with our Down the Drain investigative team is, of course, on that part of the story for us, and he's joining us live with the latest on all of that. David?
Yeah, Katie, I wanted to update you on a couple of things. The first thing is that there are 9 sewer lift stations that are without power as of about an hour ago, and the Sewage and Water Board says that number is probably going to rise or has already risen. That is 9 out of 84 sewer lift stations. Again, this is the dedicated stations to lifting the sewage up and out to Florida Avenue, where the main outfall station is for receiving that and for treating the sewage. So we are not sure exactly how the issue with substation, with an Entergy substation, directly affects all of those because they get independent power feeding to those sewer lift stations. But there's one that's right nearby here. Station A is actually just behind me and a couple of blocks down on the other side of Armstrong Park. And so we don't know exactly which lift stations are affected, and that's why the mayor was urging people to conserve water at a press conference this morning. Let's take a listen to what she said when I asked her about the sewer lift stations.
On the front end, as Ramsey was giving his update on the infrastructure, talking both Sewage and Water Board as well as Entergy, we were notified of a power outage relative to the Entergy New Orleans side of the operation, just as confirmed by Councilmember Moreno. Those matters we know have compromised as it relates to the sewer system. That's where the request for water conservation came into play. That still remains active at this particular time. Ramsey, anything you need need to add, you can do so now.
Yeah, real quick. So yeah, David, we just got that, which is why those ENO generators are being deployed. Hopefully we'll get through it, but I think for our residents, an overwhelming approach to this storm. If you don't need to use water, don't use it for the moment, okay? For the moment, if you don't need to use water, just be conservative with it.
So that was the city's infrastructure czar, Ramsey Green, specifically talking about the attempt to get Entergy's generators out to those lift stations. Again, we don't have the exact locations of those 9 lift stations that are without power, but the process is ongoing to try to get those back up so that people can use their water, flush their toilets and all that, and not have to worry about that backing up. But they are telling people to conserve water as much as they can for the time being. I also wanted to update you on something that people have been hearing about that we've mentioned in the past, and that is that there's a possibility that there is an offshore oil platform that may have become unmoored in the Gulf of Mexico. This would have been the Shell Mars platform. It's about 150 miles south of New Orleans in the deep, deep water. I want to be clear that no federal agency and Shell have not confirmed that that is the case. They are all looking into it, but cannot get an assessment until they can get out there after the storm has cleared. But I want to make sure that it is clear that this is a floating, tension-connected platform, not one that is a steady structure all the way down. So if it was knocked off its mooring, it would be floating in the Gulf. And it's important to note, Shell says that they had already evacuated that platform prior to the storm of all personnel, and they had shut in all wells that were connected to that platform. So if it is loose, as has been reported by some outlets, and they confirm that after they get out there to assess it, it would not likely to have caused any damage to the bottom of the seafloor where the wells come up and where they're closed in, as we've seen with the Taylor Energy platform that did collapse in 2004. So again, we continue to pursue that to make sure that we get that confirmed if that is the case. But at this point, we do not have that confirmed, and that platform was already evacuated of personnel, and all the wells were shut in prior to the storm's arrival. Back to you.
All right, David, thank you very much, and thank you for clearing all that up. We're looking at some video in the French Quarter right now.
Yeah, winds whipping. We're hearing it at the station here. We've already lost power. We definitely took some power hits here at our Rampart Street studios. And it appears that that is happening in many parts of the city of New Orleans. We heard the same story uptown a couple of hours ago. So it is a slow progression, even though the winds are not even as high as they're expected to get here in the city. But power is already becoming an issue.
I'm taking a look at those maps right now, the outage maps that we've been seeing through Entergy, and they're just continuing to climb more and more and more throughout the day. Right now in Jefferson Parish, there's about 118,000 people, I should say customers, without power, and in Orleans Parish we've got 94,000 people, and then over in St. Tammany Parish with Clico there are just under 10,000 people without power over there. So this is definitely intensifying in that way.
Yeah, and this is a look in Homa where they are expecting to get some of the worst of Hurricane Ida just in the next little bit. Chris Franklin has been keeping us posted on when they expect to get it there. Any idea on the timing on that, Chris? In Homa.
In Homa. This looks pretty bad right here.
Yeah,
they're closing in on it if we want to.
Closing in on it. Okay, so they're closing in on the worst of it.
Yes, well, they've already gotten the outer eye wall, which looks like we can kind of estimate wind speeds are about 90 mile per hour gusts. And let's see where.
And you got to assume this is probably from the outer one because it's been sent into us. So are they in the inner one yet? The inner wall yet?
They're getting very close. I'm pulling up our radar now, and we can maybe even jump over to that just for a second, just to show you Homa, and there's the outer eye wall. This is.
The hurricane hunters going. We're gonna show video of them going in the eye of the storm.
Good Lord!
Look at this.
And that's just it's an amazing sight.
It's incredible that they're able to do it. It just blows my mind every time we have one of these storms and we see that they're just crisscrossing in and out of the eye wall like it's nothing.
I've spoken to many of them over the years. In fact, guy, Chris Dyke, is a major in the Air Force now. I went to college with him, and he's one of the hurricane hunters. And they'll all tell you, I would rather fly through a Category 5 storm than ever ride it out on the ground. These guys think people that ride them out on the ground are nuts. And they fly into hurricanes.
And
they've said,
nuts.
What?
And we think they're nuts.
And we think that, and they will all tell you the exact same thing. They will all say, I would rather fly into it than ever ride it out on the ground.
Yeah, but when you see that eye, and you were talking about that earlier, Chris, that when you get into that eye, it's just dead calm.
It is dead calm. It's an eerie feeling. And really, if you folks remember back to last year, the first time a lot of New Orleanians actually got to experience it was Zeta. It passed directly over the city, and folks went outside to start cleaning up.
I do remember that.
That was in the eye, and you know, you had the opposite side of the eye wall that would pass right back over, and the winds would pick up again, and usually very quickly. It goes from dead calm to those winds ramping up very, very rapidly. And it looks like in Houma, they're, if not totally underneath that outer eye wall than most of the city is, and that inner eye wall is closing in pretty quickly at the moment. So there may be a little bit of a lull here for a few minutes in Houma before, again, this is what I'm talking about right here, before that here's the outer eye wall that's passing through at the moment, and then here comes the inner eye wall where winds are going to be stronger as the eye itself, the center of the storm, looks as though it's going to either pass directly over Houma. It may center itself more over the Lockport up toward Raceland area, but certainly getting in on the worst winds.
And Chris, I have a friend in Thibodeau. Sorry to cut you off, Eric. I have a friend in Thibodeau who's just up on your graph there on that radar, just a little bit, and he said that they were just starting to get pummeled.
And pummeled in with respect to the center of the storm, those would be the weaker winds and rain. That's not, it's going to go downhill very quickly.
Well, yeah, there's more pummeling to come.
Yes, there are a lot more from, you know, kind of round 1 and 2 here.
Speaking of pummeling, we can hear the roof here. It sounds like it's ready to fly off.
It does, and the winds are picking up. Let's see, we can go into our metro winds graphic and actually look at what the wind speeds are doing here in the city. And you know, they're gusting up to 40 to 50, almost 60 miles an hour across parts of the city from downtown into mid-city. They're picking up across Metairie, parts of Jefferson Parish. They're gusting up to 82 mile per hour wind gusts.
That's high,
at the Lakefront Airport.
Thus the reason they closed the airport. Now let me ask you this, Chris. We're still a couple of hours away or so from the worst here in the city?
Yes, so what we have been listening to outside of our building in the city is not the worst, because the worst, why not our radar here?
So I'm going to try to not say the roof's about to fly off if it's about to get a lot worse.
Yeah, so we might need to all hang on to it or something. But yeah, we're looking at, again, based on the trajectory of the storm, you know, kind of moving in this direction toward the northwest. It does look like we're going to stay clear across most of the metro area from this outer eye wall. Just based on the trend, it does look like we're going to stay clear of this outer eye wall where the winds have been gusting up to 90 miles an hour. But as I just pointed out, along the lakefront, you have an exposed area. The winds may gust there anyway. In the city, we're looking at some of these bands of heavy rain, which are now moving through, and we have been finding winds of probably about 50 to 60 miles per hour. Yet to be seen if we're really going to see sustained hurricane force of over 75 miles per hour in the city, as it does look like even those hurricane force winds are just about wrapped around the outer eye wall. So that area of the strongest winds looks to be in more this region that kind of cut a swath that will move up toward the northwest. We may avoid the metro area from getting the worst of the winds. Unfortunately, for points northwest of there, Thibodeau, and then as you continue into the river parishes, you're not going to avoid it.
Yeah, but right now, and we've seen with the wind we're getting right now, we've seen a fair amount of damage around the city. Justin Kennedy from Parkway Bakery and Tavern sent me a picture. His sign got blown off.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean,
already.
Yeah, people are still getting stuff. We saw that shot in the French Quarter when Tom was in the Mobile Forecast Center, sorry.
That's the technical term.
And then that awning was down. I mean, we are already seeing some damage around the city.
Yeah.
Very much so.
I can't even imagine what it's like down in Galliano and those places. I mean, Galliano, it might be calm right now if your radar is any indicator.
Well, it looks like just to the west of Galliano is where the eye of the storm is. So Galliano itself looks like they're in on the eastern inner eye wall right now. So they are getting some of the strongest winds.
It must just be scary.
That is terrifying. If it's scary here in the city and the winds have not been nearly what they're experiencing down along the coastline, that must be terrifying. And then your friend in Thibodeau saying it was getting rough. That's not the word to describe it. It's going to get a whole lot worse coming up here.
And when is this thing going to start to weaken, Chris?
that's
been the big question.
That has been the million-dollar question.
It's time.
Kind of looking at some of our graphics to get a little bit better idea of the structure of the storm and when we should start to see. I was going to show a wind model, but even our forecast models have been almost overestimating it. Thankfully, they have been almost overestimating the intensity of the wind and the size of that maximum radius of those strong winds. So just to get an idea with the rainfall, and you can kind of judge that as you get the more intense rain bands moving through, you're also going to find some of the strongest winds. Notice even as of 7 o'clock, now look from 6:45 up to 7, the National Hurricane Center, it's still a 4, then dropping to a 2. And we are going to find ourselves in New Orleans again through the 4 o'clock up till 7, 8, within some of the strongest winds. So this isn't going to be a quick inundation of some of the strong winds. 8:30, 9 o'clock, finally moving. You see the center up toward Baton Rouge. So it really won't be until 10 that we kind of see that main wind field of the hurricane force winds finally starting to pull away from the city of New Orleans. And then you're looking at some of the strong winds having been moving onto the north, having moved onto the North Shore and kind of continuing there into the overnight hours.
Question about this that you have paused right here because I'm looking at Slidell and I know that they have an issue with storm surge usually after one of these things passes, and if you look at where the storm is there, that seems problematic for them.
That would be, because at this point you still have that southerly flow and that surge of water that is still getting piled up. Now usually it's going to be the leading edge where you're going to get it worse, but it is still coming in at that point. And even for the folks along the southern coast, it is still, with that strong southerly wind, you still have that water that will be surging up. And this is going into the overnight hours now of Monday morning.
And Chris, we're watching the radar. And when do you think we'll start seeing not just the heavy winds, but the heavy rain, the possible 2, 3, 4 inches an hour?
That likely in the city will start to come. We can kind of time this out a little bit. Rather soon. I've been kind of talking about maybe the next hour or so we should start to see some of the heaviest rainfall, and then kind of slowly animating this. You're still looking at kind of the core of the heavy rainfall going into later on tonight. Some of the rainfall totals around the area so far have been manageable. So far the rain has been at least as far as in the city and all of our observing stations, not terrible. We've seen almost an inch of rain at Kenner, a little more than an inch downtown, almost an inch and a half, a little more than that from Lakefront up to Slidell. So far we have been okay, but more rain is to come. And it's going to be during that 4 to maybe